Hello, Lisa. Welcome back. Hopefully, you had a great Easter, Passover. If you're celebrating Passover. Hopefully, I know we, couldn't be with our families, our extended families. So hopefully, you guys made the best of it. Still made those connections. So hopefully, you had a great break. You're rested, relaxed, and you're excited to get back to looking at early American history, in particular the Civil War. It's worth a try. Okay. Anyway, so today we're going to start talking about the Civil War. And so before we start talking about battles and that type of stuff, we need to look at strategies, resources, advantages, disadvantages, that type of thing. Why the heck is each side fighting? So that's what I have for you guys today. So a little bit of notes just on some background stuff. That'll be at the rest of this video. There's a little bit of homework tonight, looking at some causes of why each side is kind of fighting. The interesting thing with that is the South arguments. That reading is coming from after the war. So they're already starting to do that kind of spin that's not really about slavery. It's about, yeah, but it was really about slavery. So it is kind of funny to look at those documents from just after the war where they've lost and realize, okay, we can't say we fought for slavery because who's going to sympathize with that? So you have that handout. Yeah. So, yeah. Oh, joke. Oh my goodness. Almost forgot the joke. How can I do that? There was a poker player had a horrible accident. He lost his arm, so he had to get this prosthetic arm. The problem was he just can't deal with it. All right. Hope all is well. Stay safe, stay smart, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye. Today we're going to start our conversation on the Civil War. But before we start talking about battles, we need to start looking at the advantages and disadvantages of both sides, resources available to both sides, as well as strategies. So to start, looking at the South, in terms of why the South is fighting. So there is a reading in terms of, looking at why both sides are fighting that you have for you as well. So I won't get into this in too much in terms of detail. But if you were to ask someone in 1861, from the South, why are you fighting? They would argue they're fighting for their rights. But in reality, that is about slavery. Don't let anybody tell you that the Civil War is not fought about slavery. It is the right to own slaves. Slavery is the central question for the South to the Civil War. In terms of this being an advantage for them, it is an advantage because if they lose the Civil War, if the North triumphs, their life is different. Their entire economy is based on slavery. Their entire social structure is based on slavery. Their society is based on race and the rights that come with that. So if the North wins and slavery is eradicated, life in the South is completely different. So if you're a Southerner, you definitely have something to fight for. Other advantages is that they're going to play defense. They will view this as the war of northern aggression, and they are going to see themselves much like George Washington and his army in the American Revolution. Right? The thought being here is that they just need to play defense, that they don't have to win the war, they just have to last. They have to make the war be so costly in terms of money, in terms of lives, that the North will not want to fight it anymore. So if you remember in the American Revolution, Washington really didn't win the revolution. The British just decided they didn't want to fight it anymore. And that is exactly what the South is hoping will happen in the Civil War. And the other major advantage that the South has is that they have much better military leadership. This is going to be a problem for the North throughout the entire war, where Lincoln is desperately looking for somebody to kind of emerge as a leader. For the South, most generals in the Army were already from the South, and so the South is going to have much better military leadership than the North. For the North, why are they fighting? They're fighting to preserve the Union, which is an abstract kind of thing. They are not fighting to free the slaves, at least not in 1861. Lincoln's job is to keep the country together. And the thought was, if you are fighting to free the slaves, there's those several slave states that are still loyal to the Union, those border states. If you make this a fight to free the slaves, those border states will leave. And of those border states, Maryland is the most important to Lincoln. That Maryland is a slave state. Washington, D.C. is between Maryland and Virginia. And the thought is if Maryland leaves the Union, if Maryland joins the Confederacy, well, then Washington, D.C. will be smack dab in the middle of enemy territory. So you have to somehow keep Maryland in the country. And the thought was if you made this a war about freeing the slaves, Maryland will secede. So instead, you make this a war about saving the Union. That secession is illegal, that secession is treason. The disadvantage to this is, of course, that you don't have something tangible you're fighting for. So if you're someone from the North who's going to fight the Civil War, how is your life any different if you lose? The South is basically saying we're fighting to leave us alone. And the North is saying that, no, you have to stay. You're forcing someone to stay against their will. And of course, if you're from New Jersey, your life's not any different. If South Carolina is in the country or South Carolina is not in the country, that doesn't affect you really, if you live in New Jersey. So you really don't have something tangible to fight for. Slavery would be that thing that would give you a reason to fight, that I'm fighting to free people, I'm fighting for freedom. But Lincoln cannot do that in 1861. Advantages, though, for the North, you name it, they got it. They have a much better economy, so in terms of factories, a transportation network to move supplies around. They have a navy. They have an endless supply of soldiers. In terms of population, right? This is also a big point, big move in terms of immigration. So you have new immigrants coming into the country in huge numbers, and then eventually you have black citizens who will join the Union Army. So the North has almost an endless supply of guys that the South just does not have. And again, this kind of shows you just in some numbers. Again, there's another handout that looks at these advantages that you kind of see here. But again, the North has everything kind of going for them in terms of resources. So Southern strategy, defense, right? We kind of talked about this. Play defense. If you get the opportunity, take Washington, D.C. only because it's so close. But basically, the Southern strategy is going to play defense, get it to the point where the North does not want to win, basically doesn't want to pay the price to win this war. For the North, their strategy is something called Operation Anaconda, which is created by Winfield Scott. It's actually a brilliant kind of plan that was meant to be followed in steps. So step one, blockade the South. Use the Union Navy to make sure nothing gets in or out of the South. So park your ships along the southern coast. Once you've started starving the South of resources, divide the South in half by taking the Mississippi River. West of the Mississippi River is where the South grows their food. East of the Mississippi River is where they grow cotton, which they need for their economy. So if you cut the South in half by the Mississippi River, you divide them from their food supply. And then divide what's left. Further divide the South. And then once you've basically weakened them so much by, death by 1,000 cuts, then go after the capital of the South, which is Richmond. Again, it's a great plan if you're going to do it all in, do it one step at a time. The problem for the North is they're going to get greedy and try to do the whole thing in one movement. So in 1861, they're already attacking Richmond before they've kind of set up a blockade, before they've divided the South. That strategy isn't going to work. And again, that comes from having bad military leadership. Anyway, so in terms of soldiers, who's going to serve in your army? So recruitment is, getting volunteers. Conscription is drafting soldiers, forcing them to fight. And so this is all done on the local level, meaning that when people signed up, in their neighborhoods, so if people signed up together from Ridgewood, they fought together in Ridgewood. It'll be the South that will pass the first conscription law. It'll be the South which will be the first one to draft soldiers into the army to force people in. And originally in the South, any men between the ages of 18 and 35 will be forced into the military. You can see they will raise that, and then by the end of the war, if you're old enough to hold a weapon, um, you can fight for the South. Certain people, though, are exempt. So religious figures, priests, ministers, they don't have to fight. If you're a craftsman, if you're a shoemaker, gunsmith, right, they need your skills at home. You don't have to fight. And if you're a plantation owner, right, if you have 20 or more slaves, you don't have to fight. The thought being is that plantation owners are not needed to fight because they're needed to grow cotton, to run the economy. And so you get that idea that it's a rich man's war, meaning the rich are going to benefit from this war, but they aren't the ones who have to fight it. And eventually, 4 out of every 5 eligible Southern males will fight in the Civil War. And in the South, that once you were drafted, you were in that war for the duration, which the end product of that was that soldiers in the North, rather soldiers in the South, were battle tested. They had fought for years together. They knew each other. And so as a result, you had a pretty solid and effective fighting force that the South will have. On the North is going to reluctantly draft soldiers. They'll go until about 2 years into the war before they have to force people into the war. So they're going to rely heavily on recruitment. Again, because they have so many people, they can do this. But you could get out of the draft in the North. So even if you are drafted, you could pay $300 and then you're good, or you could hire a replacement to come and serve in your place. So why would someone, want to do this? The thought was, if you're a recent immigrant to the country, this is one way to prove, you want to be here and that you should be here. As a recent immigrant, you get, a couple $100 or whatever that someone is paying you to serve in their stead. So you get that money, you get to give it to your family. But then you get well, first off, you get instant citizenship. Then you get money for being in the military, which you can send home to your family, and then you get a pension for the rest of your life. So for immigrants, this was a pretty good deal if you could get it.